I never imagined that my boat would become a real instrument of justice, but it did. Just imagine the situation. Karen, my neighbor, the head of the HOA, parked a wedding limousine right in my yard on the day of her daughter's wedding. She demanded that I sacrifice my space for their event without even asking permission. And in the end, she got what she had long deserved. Just listen and you will understand everything for yourself. Now, to give you some background, I live in a dead-end cul-de-sac. It's quiet, predictable, the good kind of boring. My house sits tucked away at the end, wrapped in pine trees, and boasts a long, private driveway, one of the main reasons I bought the place. Nobody bothers me there. I even park my boat there, my pride and joy, a gleaming white beauty with navy blue trim. Her name, No Compromise, stenciled proudly along the side. Ironic looking back now. So you can imagine my shock when I stepped outside and found this ridiculous limo blocking everything. My garage, my front steps, and most importantly, access to my boat. No note, no knock, not even a heads up. Just the limo's engine humming away and tuxedo guy casually flipping through his phone like he was waiting on a cheeseburger delivery. I cleared my throat to get his attention. Nothing. I raised my voice a notch, asking if he was aware he was parked on private property. He finally glanced up, smirked, and said, "Oh, we were told it's fine, just for the ceremony. Should only be a few hours." Before I could spit out a reply, I heard the unmistakable click of high heels on pavement. I turned around, and there she was, HOA Karen herself. She wore a cream blazer that practically screamed, "I control your mailbox," with a clipboard tucked under one arm and a smug smile big enough to cross state lines. "Don't be dramatic," she said, flapping a dismissive hand at me like I was just another line item on her list of things to ignore. "It's my daughter's big day. Surely you can sacrifice your ugly boat space for a few hours of happiness." Now let me tell you, Karen and I had history. This wasn't our first clash. She once slapped a passive-aggressive note on my windshield because my grass was allegedly 1.5 inches too tall. She even tried fining me because my flagpole wasn't painted the exact HOA-approved shade of beige. So trust me when I say, this little limo stunt wasn't some innocent misunderstanding. Nope. This was Karen's pièce de résistance. She had schemed this out, fully expecting me to just sit back and let her hijack my property like she owned the deed. I took a deep breath, clenching my jaw to keep it civil. "Karen," I said, "you didn't ask. You didn't even let me know. You just dumped a limo here like I run a wedding rental service." Karen crossed her arms, already irritated that I wasn't rolling over like she expected. "It's just for a little while," she huffed. "The limo needs to be close for the bride's big entrance. And anyway, you barely use this space. That ridiculous boat hogs half of it already. You should be thanking us for making use of the rest." Thanking her? She actually said I should be grateful. I turned my head slowly toward the limo. The driver was watching the whole thing now, shrugging like it was way above his pay grade. "So, you're not moving it?" I asked, giving them both one last shot at coming to their senses. Karen's smile widened, her eyes practically sparkling with entitled fury. "No, and if you try anything, the HOA will fine you for harassment. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a wedding to rue." With that, she spun around and stormed off, her heels stabbing the concrete like angry little exclamation points. I stood there a moment, staring from the limo to my boat and back again. And that's when the idea hit me. A wicked, glorious, beautifully petty idea. If they were going to turn my property into their personal playground, then they were about to see what happens when you mess with the wrong neighbor. I headed straight into the garage and hit the button for the big steel door. Sunlight streamed in, lighting up No Compromise like she was the star of the show. She was already loaded on her trailer, good to go. I backed my truck up, hitched her up with the kind of speed that would have impressed NASCAR, and rolled out. Slow, deliberate, like the villain in a heist movie, savoring the moment before dropping the hammer. As I rounded the block, I caught sight of the wedding setup on the community lawn. White chairs neatly arranged, a flower arch swaying in the breeze, and clusters of folks wobbling around in too tight shoes, faking small talk. Right in the center, barking orders like a discount cruise director, was Karen, completely clueless about the storm heading straight for her. When I circled back, the limo was still sitting pretty, and Tuxedo Guy was now sprawled across the hood like it was his living room couch. Perfect. I carefully backed my truck and boat right up behind the limo, parked so tight the trailer's bumper was just a few inches from their rear end. There was absolutely no way they were getting that limo out now. The beast was boxed in, trapped between my house and no compromise. A 26-foot testament to the words Karen clearly didn't understand. Private property. I climbed out, grabbed a folding chair from the porch, and plopped myself down like I was settling in for a front row show. The limo driver wandered over, scratching his head. That's staying there?" I gave him my best polite smile. Absolutely. From somewhere down the street, I heard it. A scream. Not just any yell. A full-on, rage-fueled banshee shriek that bounced off the rooftops and even scared a squirrel out of a tree. That's when I knew, oh yeah, I struck pure gold. The wedding was less than an hour away. The limo wasn't going anywhere. And Karen? She had no idea the kind of chaos she'd just unlocked. Sure enough, here came Karen, charging down the sidewalk like a possessed wedding planner. Phone in one hand, clipboard in the other, her frown lines so deep they probably needed their own zip code. The moment her eyes locked onto the boat blocking the limo, she stopped dead in her tracks, mouth hanging open like a glitching cartoon character. "You need to move that thing, now," she barked, finally finding her voice. I didn't even blink, just leaned back in my chair, sipping my lemonade, legs casually crossed, soaking in every delicious second like it was the season finale of my favorite show. I even waited a few extra beats before answering, just to really let the silence burn. "You mean my boat, sitting on my own driveway?" I asked, layering my voice with enough fake innocence that it practically dripped sarcasm. "Yeah, I figured I'd finally do something with all that wasted space you said I wasn't using." Karen looked like she was about to explode. "The limo needs to leave after the ceremony. My daughter's got a hair appointment at the salon, and they're taking pictures by the lake. You've boxed them in." I tilted my head, pretending to thoughtfully study the massive fiberglass beast and metal trailer parked snug behind the limo. "Yeah, you're right. Looks like a pretty tight squeeze in there," I said. "Maybe next time, they shouldn't treat a stranger's driveway like a public parking lot." "You're being impossible," she snapped. "No, Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm and even. "I'm just being a good neighbor, teaching a free lesson in boundaries and physics." Her lip wobbled like she wanted to scream bloody murder, but even Karen knew better than to put on a full meltdown with the guests starting to arrive. Instead, she took a sharp breath and tried the reasonable act. "Look," she said, forcing a tight smile, "let's not ruin the day. Just move the boat, and we'll be out of your hair before sunset. No harm done." I leaned forward in my chair, grinning like I had a secret. "Harm was already done the second you decided my property was your personal parking lot," I whispered. Karen spun on her heel and stomped back toward the gathering crowd of flower girls, groomsmen, and guests, who were all starting to sense that something was seriously off. It wasn't long before I heard her, voice rising higher with every panicked sentence as she barked into her phone. Part of me figured she was calling in the HOA cavalry, or maybe her cousin with a tow truck. But what actually showed up was even better. About 15 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled into the cul-de-sac. No lights, no sirens, Just that slow, deliberate crawl cops use when they know they're walking into some petty neighborhood drama. Karen lit up like a Christmas tree when she saw them, practically sprinting toward the officer, jabbing her finger at me like I had sunk the Titanic. The cop, staying cool and professional, headed for me first. "Good afternoon, sir," he said. "We got a call about a parking dispute." "Dispute's a strong word," I said, handing him a cold bottle of water I had prepped just for this occasion. Karen here had a limo dropped on my driveway without asking, so I parked my boat behind it, still on my own property. Now she's mad, the limo can't leave. The officer nodded slowly, taking it all in as he surveyed the scene. "So," he said, "the limo doesn't belong to you, but the boat does?" "Correct. And you own this property?" "Got the title inside if you want to see it," I said. Of course, Karen couldn't stay quiet longer than 10 seconds. "He's doing it on purpose," she shrieked. "This is a wedding. He's sabotaging everything. Just make him move the stupid boat." The cop glanced between us, looking like he was fighting back a laugh. He cleared his throat and asked Karen, "Did you have permission to use this driveway?" "Well, no," she huffed, "but it's just a driveway. It's not like we broke into his house." The officer's eyebrow arched up like it was trying to escape his forehead. "So, you parked a vehicle you don't own on someone else's private property without permission, and now you're upset that he's using his own property?" Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Turning back to me, the officer said, "Technically, you're well within your rights. It's your property, no damage done. It's a civil issue at most." Karen's arms started flailing like she was trying to take off. "So you're not going to do anything?" The cop gave her a polite, almost sympathetic smile. "Oh, I'm doing something," he said. "I'm leaving, because there's no law being broken here. But I'd recommend you figure out a way to get that limo moved after the boat's gone, whenever that happens to be." Karen stood there completely stunned, her mouth hanging open like someone had hit pause. And just when I thought the show couldn't get any better, a sleek car pulled up, and out stepped the bride. The bride. White dress, hair curled to perfection, makeup flawless, the whole 9 yards. She stepped out, still smiling like she was expecting a picture-perfect day, until she spotted her mother arguing with a cop, a boat blocking her limo, and wedding guests whispering like they were watching a live soap opera. Karen rushed to her daughter, arms wide. "Sweetheart, it's fine. It's just a tiny misunderstanding, nothing to get worked up over." But the bride wasn't buying it. She locked eyes with me, her smile fading into tired curiosity. "Excuse me," she said politely, "is this your house?" "Yep. And the boat?" "Also mine." She sighed, glancing at the limo, then turned slowly back toward her mother. "Mom, what did you do?" Karen started rambling something about venue logistics and everything being for the good of the wedding, but the bride wasn't even listening. She pulled out her phone. "We're calling another ride," she said sharply. "Move the limo. I'm not dealing with this. I told you to stay out of planning. You promised." Karen stood there frozen, like someone had yanked the batteries out of her remote control. Behind me, I could hear a couple guests muttering things like, "Finally." And about time she stood up to her. And just when I thought the cherry had been placed neatly on top of this whole debacle, the limo driver, who had been sitting in the back seat this whole time, climbed out, looking sweaty and fed up. "Hey," he called over to Karen, "I've been sitting in this heat for 2 hours. If this car doesn't move in the next 10 minutes, I'm charging overtime." Karen's face went from tomato red to sheet white in an instant. I almost felt bad for her, but I wasn't finished, not even close, because tucked away in my back pocket was a final move so petty, so perfect, it was going to turn Karen's bad day into full-blown HOA legend. The next morning, the fallout was everywhere. By sunrise, I already had 3 texts and a voicemail from neighbors who had been casually walking by and just wanted to say how much they admired my, quote, ingenious use of personal property. Some even offered to bring lawn chairs if the standoff dragged out. I just smiled and told them, don't worry, the best was yet to come. Because while the bride had caught her Uber escape and saved her wedding day, the limo, it was still stuck right there in my driveway. And Karen? Oh, Karen had only gotten worse overnight. She was back in full-throttle entitlement mode, and this time, she wasn't coming alone. Around 10:30 a.m., the cavalry showed up. First, Karen's minivan rolled in, crammed with wedding decorations and a few very cranky-looking relatives. Then, right on cue, came Franklin, the HOA president himself, gripping his clipboard like it was a shield and he was marching into battle. And for the grand finale, an unmarked tow truck crept around the corner. The driver looking half confused, half ready for absolute chaos. I was already settled on my porch, coffee steaming in hand, watching it all unfold like a front row seat to the best drama this neighborhood had ever seen. Karen climbed out of her van first, locked eyes on me, and stomped across the lawn like she owned every inch of it. Okay, she barked. All fake patience gone. This little show has gone on long enough. You've made your point. Time to grow up and move that stupid boat. Morning, Karen, I said with a lazy wave. Nice day for a parking dispute, huh? She wasn't laughing. The wedding's over. The guests are gone. The photographer couldn't even get all the shots because of this circus you caused. Now move the boat, and we'll just pretend none of this ever happened. I raised an eyebrow. Pretend? I said, oh no, Karen. This one's going up on the highlight reel. Might even frame a picture of the great boat limo standoff and hang it in the living room. That's when Franklin waddled up, coughing politely like he didn't want to be here any more than I wanted him to be. Sir, he began in his most official HOA voice, as president of the association, I'm here to inform you that you're in violation of our community harmony guidelines. We formally request you to remove the obstruction so the vehicle can exit peacefully. I set my coffee cup down, stood up, and walked down the steps to meet him face to face. Community harmony guidelines? I asked. Is that what we're calling trespassing these days? I let that hang a moment before adding, because I've got full video footage, timestamps, and 3 witnesses ready to testify that Karen gave the Be reasonable, he said weakly. It's just a misunderstanding. No, I said sharper now. It's not a misunderstanding. It's pure entitlement. And if you want to bring in the law, by all means. But until the limo owner personally apologizes and signs a liability waiver, that boat isn't moving an inch. Karen, meanwhile, absolutely lost it. You're humiliating me, she shrieked. I turned slowly toward her, smiling. That's funny, I said, because it looks like you're doing a pretty good job of that all by yourself. She spun around in a rage, furiously dialing her phone again. Meanwhile, the tow truck driver wandered up the driveway, looking about as thrilled as a guy being asked to defuse a bomb. So, am I towing the boat or the limo? He asked. Neither, I said, unless you feel like getting sued today. This is private property. The boat's mine. The limo's not. Touch either one without paperwork, and you'll be cutting me a settlement check by dinner. He nodded, real slow, and headed back to his truck, clearly deciding this headache wasn't worth whatever sad paycheck Karen had promised him. With her legal options drying up fast, Karen switched to Plan C. She sent over a relative, some middle-aged guy with greased-back hair and a gold chain, who introduced himself as Vince. Vince went for the friendly approach. Look, pal, he said, putting on his best let's be buddies smile. I get it, you're upset, but can't we just squash this and move on? My niece's wedding was a mess. My sister's losing her mind, and I've been stuck all night listening to everybody scream at each other. We move the limo, and we all pretend none of this ever happened. Honestly, he sounded halfway decent, but I wasn't budging. Tell you what, Vince, I said, leaning in a little. I'll move the boat in 2 hours. But before that, I'm posting the whole story online with photos and videos. People ought to know what happens when someone decides their convenience matters more than respect. Vince's face paled. You're gonna humiliate the whole family, he said, almost pleading. No, I said, voice even. Karen already did that. I'm just making sure everyone sees it. Right about then, Karen came stomping back, looking puffed up and smug again. Fine, she snapped. I just spoke to legal. They said you're creating a hostile environment. And your limo created an illegal one, I shot back. So I guess we're even. Except I'm not filing charges. Yet. Karen's face twisted like she had bitten into a lemon. What's it gonna take for you to end this? I smiled sweetly. An apology. On video. Posted to the neighborhood group chat. Karen looked like her soul left her body for a second. No, she barked. Absolutely not. Then the boat stays, I said with a shrug. And if it's still sitting here tomorrow, I'm turning it into a barbecue pit. Might even throw a driveway fish fry. You're invited. The silence was deafening. Even Franklin looked like he wished he could melt into the nearest hedge. Finally, Karen cracked. Kind of. She didn't record a video apology like I asked, but the bride, bless her heart, showed up again. She apologized directly, woman to woman, no drama. And she got her mom to sign a handwritten note admitting she'd trespassed without permission. I snapped a photo of the note from my records, shook the bride's hand, and finally moved the boat. The limo sputtered to life and creaked its way off my property, with Karen sulking in the passenger seat, her arms crossed so tight you'd think she was trying to strangle herself. But for me, it wasn't over, not even close, because this whole mess hadn't just been about a wedding or a blocked limo. It was about a pattern. And Karen was about to learn that her reign of petty power was crumbling faster than she realized. The next few days were eerily quiet. Too quiet. It was the kind of heavy silence you get after a bad storm, where the clouds still hang low and you know it's not truly over yet. Karen didn't show her face. The limo disappeared. The neighborhood buzz cooled down, on the surface at least. But underneath it all, everyone knew Karen wasn't done scheming. She wasn't the type to take a public loss without plotting something worse. I just didn't expect her to drag the entire HOA down with her for the sequel. It started with a letter. No envelope, just a single printed sheet slid under my door like some cheap horror movie prop. It was on official HOA letterhead, and it absolutely reeked of Karen's cheap perfume. The letter accused me of aggressive obstruction of communal peace, inappropriate storage of marine equipment, and deliberate disruption of neighborhood events. No fines attached. Just a nasty warning that my property would be under formal review at the next board meeting. The timing was way too perfect to be a coincidence. Karen was out for revenge, but this time she wasn't yelling and stomping. She was weaponizing the HOA rules like a sneaky little villain. Now, I could have ignored it. I could have shrugged and gone about my life. But ignoring people like Karen? That's exactly how they slither back into control. So instead, I rolled up my sleeves and got busy. I pulled out the HOA bylaws and went through them line by line, highlighting every single contradiction and loophole Karen had ever exploited. I compiled a fat file of every ridiculous complaint she'd ever thrown at me over the years, some so ridiculous you'd think I was making them up. There was the time she reported my garden hose for being too green, and another time when she actually filed a complaint claiming my wind chimes were committing noise aggression. That's when I decided it was time to talk to some neighbors. Turns out, I wasn't alone. Everyone had their own Karen horror story. One neighbor got slapped with a fine just for hanging a kid's drawing in their window. Another caught a violation notice because their mailbox was too whimsical. Karen's fingerprints were all over the place, like a bad detective novel. When the day of the big HOA meeting rolled around, I didn't walk in empty-handed. I carried a full binder, 4 sworn statements from other homeowners, and a crystal-clear, time-stamped screenshot of Karen's limo sitting smack in the middle of my driveway. The meeting was at the community clubhouse, but honestly, the vibe in there felt more courtroom, the neighborhood get-together. Karen was already parked up front, sitting stiff and sour-faced. Her mouth locked in that permanent scowl of hers. She didn't glance at me as I walked by. She didn't need to. The air between us practically crackled. Franklin, the HOA president, shuffled to the front, mumbling his usual awkward intro, trying to keep things light. But before he could even open the first agenda item, Karen jumped in. "I'd like to make a motion to censure Mr. Coleman for reckless behavior and deliberate hostility at a neighborhood event," she declared. The room froze. Every head turned toward me. I stood up slowly, flipping open my binder like I was unholstering a weapon. "Actually," I said, "I'd like to respond to that. But first, I have some evidence to submit." Franklin blinked, thrown off. This isn't a court," he stammered. "Well," I said, "maybe somebody should tell Karen to stop pretending she's Judge Mathis." That got a few snickers and some straight-up laughs from the back rows. I started handing out my evidence. First the screenshots, then copies of the messages, then the neighbor statements, and I laid it all out, plain and steady. How Karen used HOA rules like her own personal wrecking ball, swinging at anyone who annoyed her. How she abused her position, weaponizing petty codes to control the neighborhood. How she thought nothing of trespassing with a rented limo for her daughter's wedding and then tried to bully her way out of it. And for the grand finale, I played a short video clip. There was Karen, flailing her arms around like a magician, laughing and saying, "It's just a driveway, no big deal." When I finally sat down, the silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Karen's eyes darted around, desperate for backup. But nobody would meet her gaze. That's when Marlene, one of the board members who hardly ever spoke, cleared her throat. "Maybe," she said quietly, "it's time we reconsider our leadership. This isn't the first issue we've had." Karen's head snapped around. "You're all turning on me over one mistake?" she screeched. "That man boxed in a limo with a boat. Who does that?" Eddie, a neighbor from down the street, chimed in without missing a beat. Someone protecting his property from a neighbor who thinks she owns the cul-de-sac. And let's be real, it wasn't just one mistake, Karen. We've all had our share of you. Karen stood up, face burning red, fists clenched. "You think I'm the bad guy? I was just trying to make my daughter's wedding special. I've spent years keeping this neighborhood clean and organized. And this is the thanks I get?" Franklin, looking like he aged 5 years during that meeting, sighed and took off his glasses. "Karen," he said, voice tired, "you've done a lot for the HOA. But maybe it's time for a change. Too many complaints. Too much division." Karen's chair screeched back across the floor as she stormed out. She didn't say a word, just left. And when the door swung shut behind her, it was like the whole room exhaled at once. The board moved fast after that. They voted to suspend Karen's position pending a formal review. Marlene stepped up as acting head in the meantime. There wasn't any clapping or cheering, just this quiet sense of relief hanging in the air. The spell Karen had over the neighborhood was finally broken, and everybody felt it. That night, a handful of us gathered for a driveway barbecue. We grilled, swapped stories, and someone even brought a cake shaped like a little white boat. At one point, someone jokingly asked if I was finally going to move my boat back into the garage now that the war was over. I thought about it for a second, grinned, and said, "Not yet. Let's give it one more day. You know, just in case." Everybody laughed, but deep down, I wasn't really kidding. Because with Karen, You could never quite trust that the drama was done for good. A full week slipped by before anybody caught sight of her again. And honestly, those days felt like a breath of fresh air. No clipboard patrols, no passive-aggressive complaints about dog leashes or driveway basketball. Even Franklin seemed 10 years younger without her shadow looming over him. But deep down, we all knew better. Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. Sure enough, when she came back swinging. Early Saturday morning, the neighborhood woke up to flyers plastered everywhere, on mailboxes, doors, bulletin boards, you name it. Big, glossy, two-sided flyers with the bold headline, "The Truth Behind the Boat Bully." I nearly spat out my cereal when I found one taped to my own mailbox. There, front and center, was a terrible photoshopped picture of me standing next to my boat, complete with devil horns drawn onto my head. At the bottom, there was a fake HOA violation notice slapped on like some kind of official document. The back was even crazier. A full-blown rant about how I supposedly humiliated a grieving mother, blocked emergency vehicles, and endangered the peace of the community with my malicious nautical equipment. Malicious nautical equipment. I had to read that line 3 times, because I just couldn't believe it. I wasn't mad, though. I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the porch for a minute to catch my breath. It was obvious. This wasn't about convincing anyone. It was about Karen's sating face. She couldn't handle losing, so now she was trying to rewrite the story, casting herself as some poor, misunderstood victim, and painting me as the boat-wielding villain of the cul-de-sac. Too bad for her, the neighborhood wasn't buying it. Within hours, screenshots of the flyer were lighting up the community group chat, with people posting captions like, "New HOA fiction section just dropped," and Karen's creative writing skills finally paying off. Still, even with all the laughter, I figured it was time to remind Karen, one last time, that her little games still came with consequences. So I headed into the garage and dug out something I hadn't touched in years. A set of big vinyl banners from back when I used to run a small charter business. I hitched up the boat, dragged it out into the driveway, and spent a good chunk of the afternoon giving it a much-needed scrub down. Once it was shining like new, I carefully stretched the banners across both sides of the boat. The message was loud and clear. Private driveway, private property, private boat. Not Karen's wedding venue. And underneath, just for good measure, in smaller print, I added, "Next time, try asking." The next morning, I rolled it back into the exact same spot behind my driveway gate. Totally legal. Impossible to miss. And I left it there all day, sitting proud like a piece of modern art. Cars actually slowed down just to read it. One guy on a bicycle even pedaled up my driveway and snapped a selfie with it like he was visiting a monument. People honked as they drove past in support. Somebody even dropped off a plate of cookies on my porch with a little handwritten note that said, "Captain of Justice." Honestly, I should have started selling t-shirts or bumper stickers. But the real payoff came the following evening. I was out back flipping burgers on the grill when I spotted Karen for the first time in days. No HOA crew trailing behind her, no clipboard clutched like a shield. Just her walking stiffly down the street with oversized sunglasses covering half her face and a floppy, wide-brimmed hat tugged low like she was trying to hide from the world. She slowed to a crawl when she caught sight of the boat. Then she stopped completely. Just stood there, frozen in the middle of the road, glaring at the banner like it had personally insulted 3 generations of her family. I didn't say a word. Didn't even wave. I just flipped another burger and let the silence do the talking. Because the look on her face said it all. For once, it wasn't her making somebody else feel small. She was the one exposed now. She was the one standing there, humiliated, Not because anyone had attacked her, but because she brought it on herself. After a long, painful minute, Karen finally turned on her heel and stalked off without saying a thing. But she didn't need to. The message had been delivered, and this time, it landed exactly where it needed to. Loud, clear, and impossible to ignore. If you liked this story, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And we also recommend listening to the story about how a Karen organized a wedding in my yard without permission. So I invited a gang of bikers to, well, you can listen to the rest of the story. Just click on the icon pointing to the arrow. Thank you for watching.